My name is Byrne, and I'm the managing partner and founder of a technology consulting firm called Mesh IP. We are responsible for providing technology strategies, new product, as well as go-to-market strategy, really focused on technology enablement, both for those product development efforts as well as for those that are launching new businesses or going to new markets with new products. And today I'd like to talk about the consumable technology era for the small and mid-market nonprofit. What I'm going to try and do here is give you a little bit of a retrospective on the technology industry and where it's been, where it's going, and really what it means for small and mid-sized businesses. There's a real opportunity here to get out of the IT business. And having started and run small businesses, I've been the president and CEO of a couple of different small businesses, as well as working with companies without huge IT staffs. I understand the pain and suffering that goes on in trying to make technical decisions, build your own infrastructure, and then manage that infrastructure. I was part of the technology industrial complex for about 30 years, selling technology to corporations, and I understand how that cycle works, in that the real money isn't necessarily made in that initial sale. It's the ongoing maintenance and upgrades and additions, and there's an opportunity here to get out of this. If you look at the graphic I have up there, you can see an electric plug and a water and a phone, and there is an opportunity now for businesses to consume technology much like we consume electricity or we consume water. You really can get out of the business of being your own power company, of being your own water company. You pick up the phone and you have dial tone. You don't have to be a telecommunications carrier to do that. You don't have to be an electrical company. But there's an approach that's necessary to do that. And part of what I'm going to do here is maybe ruffle some feathers, especially if you're an IT person, but hopefully you'll find it provocative, even if you don't agree with me. And hopefully the technology will work for me here. Okay, so let's just talk about where we've been in terms of the complexity and waste. Through 1980, and we'll talk a little bit about the beginning of the PC era, really has been about owning technology. You all have budgets or work for companies that have budgets, and particularly of IT budgets, where you've been responsible for the ownership of IT. And it really, depending on, even if you have great relationships with your vendors, they're trusted consultants and so on, you really have been in a hostage situation where you have been stuck in spending dependencies, upgrades, endless refresh cycles, and certainly a lot of waste, and we'll talk about what that means in terms of overbuying. And here's the key thing, I think, in the consulting efforts that I've done with small and mid-sized businesses, really is the complexity of the decision-making that you've had to make to enable your business to do business by putting in place the technology infrastructure that allows you to communicate, allows you to connect with your clients, your customers, your constituencies, and always was the uncertainty of the outcome. If I make this investment in technology, am I going to get what's being promised? Will it work as promised? And then, or am I going to be stranded with an asset I can no longer use? Am I going to impact my career in making the wrong technology decision or screwing up the deployment? When I sold to technology or sold to businesses, when companies chose me as a vendor or chose my competitor as a vendor, a big part of the time the decision they were making was a career ender if it was the wrong decision. So a lot of times they would go for safety, IBM, AT&T, whoever, because they knew they could never, as the saying goes, get fired for choosing IBM. Decisions really weren't made around the needs and the best vendor for the solution. A lot of time it was just trying to make sure that I don't get fired or really damage my career for making a poor technology decision. And really the advancement we've seen over the past 20 years has definitely benefited the vendors. Certainly companies have gotten additional capabilities, but the advantages have really accrued to the vendors, and they've definitely accrued from a financial perspective, and I'll just give you an example of that. So where are we going? And I'll talk about why I think we're going in this direction. But really in 2012 and beyond, what we're going to see is a much simpler era in terms of being able to deploy technology on behalf of your companies and constituents. This is really being driven by what's happening in the consumer market, which is might not be obvious if you haven't really kind of thought about this, but the things that are going on, I'll talk specifically about this in the consumer market, have changed the paradigm, but they've also changed the capabilities. But they've also changed the expectations for your employees and customers. But really, it's going to give you an opportunity to only pay for what you use. And decision-making becomes much simpler, but more importantly, the predictability of the outcome. The fact that you can almost guarantee you're going to get what you're hoping to get when you deploy these technologies. And then finally, because of this advancement, it really is starting to favor you. The balance is tipping away from the technology vendor in terms of that lock-in and that requirement to take his advice and be beholden to him. You're going to get a lot more strength in terms of your ability to work with vendors. So if you don't mind, we'll just spend a little bit of time talking about where we've been. And really, it's been the ownership era. Every one of you have spent probably countless dollars every year on technology assets. And you own those, whether you want them or not, whether they're working for you or not, whether they're sized correctly and perform for you. And a big part of what businesses do in terms of technology is try to avoid additional capital spend. So you're stuck working with old versions, old software, old devices because you own it. And once you own it, you don't want to have to replace it, or at least maybe perhaps your management doesn't if you're an IT staff. Certainly as a small businessman, you try and squeeze as much out of that as you can, but that limits sometimes your functionality. So it really did begin with IBM and Microsoft. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but IBM really wasn't anticipated to be the one to bring the PC to market. Acorn was the code name, and it was introduced in 1981. And in today's dollars, it cost about $3,700 for that first PC. That was without a monitor, obviously with very limited capabilities. Obviously, you get a lot more for what we pay for today. But if you think about it, a laptop, a really good laptop, you could spend close to that. So in 1980, let's just take a look at Microsoft's revenues for the year. About $7 million. 1990. Their revenue, $1.18 billion. In the year 2000, almost $27 billion. This year, the fiscal year ended in June, $74 billion. Their workhorse, the major source of revenue still is the operating system. And so really you and everyone out there that's gotten on this technology cycle are the ones that made Microsoft and all their founders rich. So with this era, with the deployment of the PC, a lot of great things came, but also came a lot of responsibility. Used to be in terms of the timeshare. For those of you that are old enough to remember timeshare, you didn't really have to manage that. But once they started to provide technology to small and mid-sized businesses, when businesses could take advantage of that technology, you then became responsible for the care and feeding of that technology. And you were also responsible for the complexity of change management. And that's what every business that I talk to today, for the most part, is struggling with. You go into small businesses, their IT staff is their brother-in-law, or some kid perhaps they have that if he ever leaves, they're really in trouble. The server is in the lunchroom and there's a shelf over it with a can of paint. I ran a small business and we had a beautiful little server room, well wired, lots of great Dell equipment, lots of support from Dell. If that building ever burned, or if there was ever a fire that caused the sprinklers to go on, we'd have been out of business. And I don't care that we had backed up the data. If that infrastructure was ever wiped out, the company would have been out of business. We did handle a lot of call center type calls for customers. They couldn't have waited. My customers couldn't have waited till we got reorganized around the opportunity to provide those services. We would have lost that business. And that's true for a lot of businesses out there. Again, just kind of taking a look so that you understand what's been going on. 1980, you had a couple of options there. Local networking in 1990s. Remember the advent of the local area network and what that meant for inter-office communication. By 2000, everybody was pretty fully networked, using the internet, obviously, with the explosion of the internet. And then 2010, you've got the network, you've got the mobile. People are starting to do some virtuals. People are starting to do some remote backup at the very least, hopefully. But again, you're responsible for managing all that, figuring it out, and deploying it. And then obviously with all this, it's not just about the infrastructure, it's about software integration and all the challenges associated with picking out software, managing license, paying for the licenses, making sure that they all play nice on the desktop. So please, as I go through this, let me know if you have any questions. So part of the challenge is that all the investment is really dealt with by planned obsolescence within the vendor communities. I mean, I don't think it's any secret that the way Microsoft continued to have that money tree grow is by continually roll out new operating systems, obviously with new features, but how many of them do you really take advantage of? You would invest in upgrades in terms of hardware and software, and you could never really capitalize on what you've already spent because the latest and greatest version would come out and you'd be forced to upgrade eventually because of it would become incompatible. And then it became very difficult to keep up with that. You're spending more time internally focused on software and hardware than managing the business. Speak up? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so just a review and then we'll move forward. If you look at in terms of Intel's upgrades and Microsoft upgrades, this is what we've been facing over the years. I think it's helpful sometimes to see this stuff graphically. This treadmill never ends and you are stuck on this treadmill. And now we've got the latest and greatest, right? Which is Windows 8. How many have deployed Windows 8? You have? Do you like it? Do your users like it?
Jury's out on it.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, why did you deploy it?
Driven by a lot of the businesses around us that are want to deploy it, and customers that we're helping are trying to get a job, and they need to know the technology.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's not in-depth training. It's at least exposure to it.
So it's helping your constituents learn the technology. Yeah.
Brian, will you repeat that?
Yep. So the reason that you deployed the Windows 8 is because of your constituency. You're doing some training and helping them get familiar with the technology.
Yes. Okay.
So it was really an externally driven decision to some extent, which makes perfect sense. I still know businesses out there that are on XP. I've got an engineering firm that I've worked with. The equipment's old, so he's forced to XP. He would have to spend thousands of dollars across his 40 engineers. He's using AutoCAD. He can't upgrade, but he needs to upgrade unless he upgrades his equipment. And XP AutoCAD license is $5,000 per engineer. And even if he goes through all of that, if he upgrades his equipment, if he upgrades XP, if he upgrades AutoCAD, the engineer can still only work at his desk because it's tied to a desktop. So that engineer can never go home and work, and he's losing the ability to do so and be productive, or when they're out on the site and they need to do a quick change. So really this is the challenge that companies face. And what it did also was drive a lot of waste, right? There's three different types of waste that businesses have experienced. Not fully monetizing something before it ends its useful life, not used to its full capacity, and then features and functions that you end up buying that you never use because it doesn't need the use. So let me give you an example, right? The average refresh on a PC is 2 to 3 years. You're kind of forced, and most companies will, at least from an accounting perspective, its useful life is gone. But the mean time between failure for the motherboard is about 113 business years. Right? The average business computer today is configured with 200 gigabits of storage and a 2 gigahertz processor. Most of the time, that processor is not even being used, right? Especially for those that do office applications and similar applications like that. You've got the average office applications is licensed for multiple applications that you never touch, that you don't use. Some people use Notes, Windows Note. I never used it, OneNote. Other applications within those bundles, and that's true also of other commercial software that your company will buy. So the solution, hopefully I've given you a perspective on kind of where we've been and what it's meant. Technology has been a wonderful thing. There's a lot of great achievements and capabilities, but it really has, the deck has been stacked against businesses, especially the small and mid-sized business. So let's talk about the consumable technology era. And I want to give you an example. Everybody has one of these, a cell phone. These are a great thing. This is a computer. I buy it. I use it. It's ready to go. It turns on almost instantly. I can customize it. I have access to data. I can put my own applications on here. Everything works well. It's consumable. I only have to pay for what I use, many times flat rate. When I'm done with it, I throw it out. I get the latest and greatest, and I don't pay much for it in terms of the device itself. But the capabilities of this thing is amazing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what this is, what it means not only for your workers, because obviously you're seeing more and more mobile workers and people working on these things, but what the technology and the competition in the mobile market has come to mean for the desktop market, if you will. And I'll drive that into what a hosted desktop is and what it can do for you. But really, what we're entering is a consumable technology era. So at the same time as the PC was coming up and you were investing in all that technology, it really was in the consumer market that all this was going on. I'll give you a little timeline. But by the end of 2004, over $118 billion is being spent in this market on the delivery of great features with great accessibility. And all the infrastructure and integration within the consumer market has really better positioned the business service providers, has made it easier for folks that provide cloud computing to be able to provide it in a manner that makes it very easy for you to deploy. I won't go too deep into here. Let me just lay this out for you. But it's really amazing when you think about it. At the same time the PC was coming up, what was going on in terms of the wireless business and the wireless handset business and what it's meant for our ability to access data, to process information, and to do the work that we do not only in our offices but at home, on the road, and so on. So this has done something besides make our lives a lot easier and keep us in communication. It's really changed the model in terms of how IT is going to be delivered. Okay, just another slide. If you look at personal computing and what it's meant, this is all the PC, but right in here with RIM and with Nokia and the Symbian, and now Android and the iPad and Windows Mobile, you almost have as many devices that are mobile devices as you do PCs that are out there now. That presents a challenge if you're an IT director in terms of bring your own device. It presents a challenge in terms of, what does that mean for security? What does that mean for convenience and the demands not only of my employees, but what does it mean for my clients as they try to access applications, websites, and so on that I'm providing to them as I try to interact with them. But what it is doing is bringing some convergence. Gartner, for what it's worth, considers it to be the most significant trend. The number one issue really is around security. It's something that everyone I talk to worries about. Where are my bits? Who's got my bits? Who can see my bits? Are my bits going to be safe? That's a big issue. Gartner, I don't think anybody ever goes back and checks them on that, but they were saying that by 2012, 20% of all companies will own zero IT assets. For me, as a small business person and having run small businesses, this would be nirvana. Why do I want IT assets? Like a car you drive off the lot, it starts to depreciate the minute that you plug it in. And then I have to spend all my time worrying about it working and as well as maintaining it and trying to keep it functioning. So if you look at IT now as a service industry rather than a hardware and software industry, the way some vendors are starting to respond is by providing a superior and low-cost performance, really focused on performance rather than assets. As far as the security, you want to make sure that the controls are in place for on-demand services, and we can talk a little bit about that, but that's something you need to get yourself comfortable with, but they are absolutely there. Again, as I look and deal with small and mid-sized businesses in all different industries, they're convinced they have that security in place, but if the server is not locked up, if you've got a bunch of staff that have access to the server that can get disgruntled, really what is the security you have in place, and are you less secure by having your data in a hardened professional data center with access controls and all the security that are in place for much larger companies that you can now take advantage of. And really, so there is a new service category, a new service provider category that's looking to address this and provide it. And I'll talk about what that means. Okay. So, you know, as we talk about consumerization, the question is, have we reached the point of no return? And I would say yes. And I'll just lay out a couple of trends that help drive home here what I'm trying to explain. One is the rise of social media as a business application. When you think about this, whether it's Facebook, but maybe more LinkedIn or niche-specific social media sites that are out there, your employees, your customers, your constituents, you're all interfacing on social networks. It becomes a way to communicate, share information. You have internal social networks, but those, again, are hosted elsewhere. For the most part, you've got a lot of data and a lot of transaction that's happening elsewhere. Definitely the blurring of work and home, part of that driven by these, but you know, remote access to email and so on. Really, that work-home boundary has blurred for better or for worse. The emergence of new mobile devices, and here I'll just point specifically to an iPad, for instance, and other devices like that. Much bigger screen. Laptop sales are dropping because people are moving to iPads. How do you handle work, applications, email, and so on an iPad device? And now I've got two different things running. I've got my life running on it and all those applications, and then I've got my work and all the data and security concerns that the IT folks have about that. Shifting business models, less and less real estate, less and less manufacturing, for better or for worse here. Really, you need tech-savvy employees. And so those tech-savvy employees, as you hire them, they have certain expectations about what they can do and what they can bring to the office and what kind of functionality you have. If you're still running, you know, a Windows XP with Windows 90 or with XP with 95, they're gonna start to get a little bit frustrated with you, and they're not going to have the capabilities. Your customers are not going to think too highly of you. So employee expectations of corporate IT are changing as well. They want things, and they want things now. They don't want to wait for IT to deliver them, and they have the ability to go around you. With the advent of cloud computing applications, Salesforce.com is a prime example of this. If the IT department can't deliver that CRM tool, I know plenty of marketing VPs will go out and sign up and get Salesforce without waiting. And there are many other applications and as well as, you know, on-demand infrastructure that if the IT department doesn't get this and doesn't help facilitate this, corporate will go right around them. And here's the point, right? When I start bringing my own phone, loading my own applications, using software as a service to bypass IT. And the other thing to think about here is this: as we look at this particular picture, it reminded me of the hurricane that we just had out on the East Coast. And for all those businesses that thought that they had backed up to their data, but their offices are gone, their infrastructure is gone, their servers are gone, are they still in business? Can their employees access all their information? Can they still deal with their clients? And so as you think about what's next for you, you need to think about what it means in terms of disaster recovery. And really what you're faced with now is that ongoing cycle of repair or cloud-based delivery. And the cloud tools that are now out there, the cloud technology is out there, touches every element of the stack here. So you can get your infrastructure from a cloud vendor, or you can put that hardware in place yourself and deal with all the power requirements, security requirements, hardware management issues that you have. Platform in terms of middleware, you can buy that middleware, license it, try and figure out which one is right for you, or you can get that on demand. Development tools for those of you that do your own development, that's all out there. But I think most importantly is business services and software. Is all out there. You don't need to buy the licenses, worry about the upgrades, who gets access. And is it right for me? Because if it isn't right for you, you just stop paying for it. I'm not stuck with a stranded asset. So let me kind of take all this. Hopefully you found it useful in terms of perspective. What you're saying, you know, in essence is my perspective based on what I've seen over the past 30 years and what my clients are struggling with and what I would like and what I use to deploy when we deploy new products or new, you know, help new companies stand up rapidly. And a big part of it is desktop as a service. So if you have an IT staff like to make themselves valuable, they like to make themselves worthwhile, and they're always going to advocate for an own-it strategy. I've rarely seen the IT staff that wants to outsource themselves. This is a much different model, and so you may get some pushback. But the point is, take all of this and use it for your leverage. And the ultimate example of this, I believe, is desktop as a service. And so I'm just going to give you a definition here. It's sometimes called VDI, or virtual desktop infrastructure, or hosted desktop. And I'll call it hosted desktop. But what you're going to get is your Windows presentation delivered as a service. And there's two types: a server hosted and a client side. So basically, if it's server hosted, it means it's not on your premises. It's in a data center. You don't own the hardware. All right, so you don't have to buy the hardware. The other is a client side. And I'll give you an example of a nonprofit that did a client side. That's what your IT department will be recommending, because they want the blinking lights and the equipment and the budget and everything that comes with it. I do not think that that's the right approach. Okay, so again, just to try and give you a perspective, if you're not familiar with this, there are machines, virtual machines. In other words, you don't own hardware. Think of the electric company or the water company. There's a power plant back there that's going to be running a desktop that you're going to log into. And we'll talk about what that means, and I'll give you a visual representation of that. And all you're going to need is an internet connection to be able to access that desktop from wherever you're at. Okay? What's that going to do for you? You're going to have full feature application capabilities. You're going to have Microsoft Windows 7. You're going to have the ability to change the wallpaper on it so you can customize it. You can load any applications. You can have servers. You have Active Directory. You have the ability to turn it on, to turn it off, to scale up or down at will with no contracts, no structural investment, and you'll be able to use whatever equipment you currently have, whether it's a iPad or an old XP desktop. So you won't have any license hassles. You don't have to worry about whether you've got the latest and greatest Windows license. And there's no worries about hardware and software pairing. Is it all going to work together? It all does work together. Before I move on and provide some more detail, are there any questions? No? Okay, yes?
So if you have a nonprofit that sets up on a virtual desktop setting,
Yep.
but they have specific software that they use, their financial software, how do they deal with that?
So the question was, for the people that watch it online, is how do you deal with specific or custom software in a hosted virtual desktop environment? One of two ways. You can just load it. If you're a single user, you can load it on that desktop. It's a Windows desktop with all the functionality you're used to, and so you can load an application on your hosted desktop. If it's a shared piece of software, then you can get a virtual server loaded on that server, and everybody has access to it. The difference here is that rather than having that software on that server in the back underneath the paint can near the lunchroom, it's in a secure data center, and it's all being delivered to you virtually, which just means remotely. Think of the old timeshare model. All what's old is new again, but much more robust. Did I answer your question? Okay. I just want to take a minute here for the virtual folks, the folks that are watching online, and give them the secret phrase. And the secret phrase is, I love the cloud. You need to tweet that with hashtag NTEN thanks. So NTEN thanks, THANKS, with a hashtag in front of that. Okay. Just a little ad from our sponsors. You're welcome. Okay. So, again, just a little way of looking at this. There's a lot here, but you can start small. You don't have to, nor would I recommend that you throw everything out. The beauty of this is on demand. So maybe you start with looking at virtualizing a work group. Maybe you bring consultants in, and rather than have them work on their PCs and perhaps take your data and their work product that you paid for with them when they leave, or be at risk of that, or you bring in temporaries, to deal with peak times, set up hosted desktops for them. And keep control of that environment. Give everybody a standard environment. Here's a chance to try this, and then tear them down when you're done with them. No cost, just that monthly rate, just like you have with your cell phones, where when you're done, you disconnect. And then eventually you can move. The idea, though, is to eventually get to where you've got full device and location independence. And you can switch between desktops, thin clients, mobile and tablets, anywhere you have access to the internet, which is everywhere. And one of the questions I get was, what happens if our internet goes down? Well, what happens if your internet goes down now? You're pretty much out of business. But you can always go to Starbucks. You can always send everybody home with LTE and all the mobile internet speeds that are coming, as well as the ability to pretty much go anywhere else and get internet. You're never really out of business. But the point is, you are device and location independent, and that's the flexibility, freedom, and security you get. So if there is a disaster, you can continue business as if you never left the office and there was never a problem. So really is what you're trying to do is liberate the entire workforce to create and share anywhere and anytime. We've heard that for a long time. That actually is now possible. And for your companies, it really is the timeline that you feel comfortable moving in that direction. So let me sort of build the opportunity for you. The key here is the internet and the broadband speeds that are available. I have a Verizon Fios connection at home. I think I pay $150 maybe for this a month, and it gives me my cable and my phone. But I have a download speed of close to 5 megabits per second. Okay, when I came up through the telcos working for AT&T, only the biggest businesses could even consider that kind of bandwidth, and they paid thousands and thousands of dollars and had special equipment and fiber pulled into their building to get it. It's amazing what is available in terms of speed. That is no longer the limiting factor. And the point is that you have devices. Some of them are old, some of them are new, some of them are compatible, some of them aren't even in control of your business. For instance, an iPad or a phone. Your employees own that for the most part. Even if you give them a phone, they're using their personal phone because it has all their personal stuff on it. So let's take a look at what's possible now in terms of an on-demand application portal. And really that's what you're getting. If you have a browser and you've got an internet connection and you've got a device to connect to the internet, so it can be an old PC, it doesn't matter, you know, what Intel processor you have in there, it doesn't matter what Microsoft operating system, what version it is, as long as that browser works, then you can access the portal and you log in with your credentials, whoever you are. And what does that give me? Well, it gives me all kinds of capabilities. I've got a PBX. I can collaborate, business apps, desktop apps, my contact. The security is there. The credentials are there. Everything you are used to today, and maybe more, quite frankly, is available via that portal, as well as help desk. And then all the hardware supporting that is remote in a data center, a fully redundant, backed up data center. So all of your data is backed up daily. So if you do have a disgruntled employee and he wipes his virtual desktop, you don't lose all that information. It's all been backed up. If there is a disaster in the data center, that information's been replicated. And if you're not comfortable with that, you can have a third backup capability. Obviously, you'll pay for that, where you can, put it local, store it locally if you're one of those people that need to have it. Sorry about that. Have your hands on it. And it provides you storage, document management, data structure, it's PCI compliant, SAS 70, and multi-site. And then I think I've got one more thing here. But then you've got the monitoring. You've got the ability to monitor it ongoing. Certainly the folks that are responsible for all that infrastructure are monitoring it, and if there's a problem. But, inevitably somebody will have a problem. They can't log into their desktop or one of their applications froze. The same things that we have, to deal with on a day-to-day basis when they own the infrastructure. But you have folks that can fix that problem for you, so you don't have to spend your time on acquisition, repair, and replace. Any questions? I know there's a lot in there. No? Okay. I think I just have a couple more. So let me give you an example. And the company is glide.org. They're out of California, and they help folks. They actually did a local hosted desktop, not the remote in the data center, but this was something they tried to build on their own, and they saw that there were definitely some benefits, right? Lab deployments, we could do quick deployments, business continuity and the backup capabilities, and multi-platform support. So they got some of the benefits, but they had a consultant that came in, and what they recommended, like any good consultant, was a build-it-yourself capabilities, because then you need that consultant to help you build it. So he experienced some gotchas from not buying that VDI in the box or that hosted desktop approach. And it's interesting when you think about it. Same problems as you always have. Hardware cost, right? Instead of developing each desktop having its own hard drive, all those drives are on NAS or SAN. If you know what that is, great. If you don't, but you're collecting all your storage in what he did here, and so he had to make an infrastructure decision as well as an investment. He had to learn about storage before he could make that infrastructure investment and decision. You had to learn about it. And again, if you're a small or mid-sized company, why do you want to? He felt he had to, but why do you want to? Licensing, and the bugaboo always is I got to figure out this licensing thing. Microsoft doesn't like cloud. They talk about cloud. You saw that money tree building. That money tree was built on licensing fees, licensing Office and licensing the operating system. They have a very complicated and painful licensing structure. So if you want to virtualize on your own, they're going to make you pay for it, and it's a pain in the ass, to be honest with you. It does not work. And then using the correct version of Windows. Again, why do I care? Why do I care if I have the right version of Windows? I just want to get work done. And troubleshooting gets harder and easier. Harder because of the extra layer of Citrix. So I've got to decide on which virtualization client I'm going to use, Citrix versus the others, and it's very easy to reimage a machine. That is, if the machine breaks, I don't have to go in there and mess with the thing. I just build up a brand new desktop. All that data saved, so he just accesses it to a new, cloned desktop. But I've had to make all these decisions. This is not the way to go. This is the way your IT department will want you to go, but this is really not the way to go. And he had to figure out which thin client. So how do I get there? This is how any good consultant would tell you to get there, and that's how your IT department will tell you to get there if you can't see it. But it's, do an assessment and strategy. So study your current environment, develop a cloud strategy, do workshops and evaluations, do some rapid prototyping, migrate one service, put together a roadmap, do some planning, and then do your implementation and migration, automated tools, custom steps, testing and QA. Who thinks that's a great idea? Who's got the time to do that? Who is excited about doing that? That's enough to make you not do it. And this is what you turn into. The same thing you were before. There's a guy who's a plumber, except on a PC. So if you're a large company, or if you got time, or you're looking for your IT guy to justify him, you certainly want to take a structured approach. And I'm kind of making fun here, but it really is a simpler way. The way we provide hosted desktops is no contract, 1 or 1,000. You order them up. We'll have them to you in 2 days. We're not the only ones that provide this. My point is that in 2 days, you can have a Windows desktop, fully figured, Office Professional. You can load Quicken on it. You can load whatever applications on it. You move your data in, put it on, on USB from the old one, or you send it to us, and we'll send it to the data center if it's a lot of data. We'll migrate it to the server or to the PC, and now I've got a cloud. Now I'm cloud computing. Does it work for me? Is the performance there? Do I like the convenience? What are my issues in terms of usability, people's comfort level in logging in and using that? You can watch HD videos on YouTube and see if that performance is there over your internet connection. Or you could do all this. I think, and a hosted desktop will cost you $125 a month. So that's the extent of your investment in beginning to play in the cloud computing environment, having a full hosted desktop. You don't need any additional equipment. You just use your laptop that you currently have, except you'll log in and it'll take over your screen, and you're working on a brand new desktop. Sometimes I think people overthink these things. If you look at Glide's example, you certainly would need to do all this to get to where he was at, but did he really solve his problems? Probably solved some of his problems, but he created a whole new set around the evaluation, around choices that were made, around buyer's remorse in some elements. So I would just suggest that there's a lot easier, especially for a small or mid-sized organization, there's a lot easier way to dip your toe in this. And then if you decide it's for you, then it's all about just ordering up what you need, just like you'd order up as many cell phones as you need, putting the applications on there you want. And the one issue that I've seen, Active Directory. Somebody still has to manage Active Directory, if you're familiar with that and what that means. You can outsource that to the vendor sometimes if you want. And the other is migrating data. It's got to get off of this device and into the cloud. That has to happen. That can be, I can help you with it. Your vendor can help you with it. You can do it yourself. Drag it from the desktop onto the virtual desktop, literally. But those are two things to kind of think through as you make the decision. So let me just, if you will let me here summarize. Net results, predictable spending, no surprises. I'm not buying equipment that all of a sudden I've got to upgrade. I'm not buying software, at least standard software package, where I'm surprised. I'm not investing in technology that maybe doesn't perform. It's always current, no upgrading. When Windows 7 moves to the next, the vendor will upgrade. The vendor will do the upgrade of the operating system for you. You don't have to keep those operating systems current. From the time I started this, it was Windows XP. Now it's Windows 7, and then eventually it'll be Windows 8. You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about the licensing costs. You're out of that software upgrade business. This is a key thing for business in these difficult times, is that you can grow or shrink at will. Since you can order a desktop and get it in 48 hours, turn it off after a month or 6 months or a year. If you grow rapidly, I can meet the needs of those folks when they show up. If I have to cut, I can get rid of those desktops, immediately reduce my cost, not be stuck with a bunch of cubes, with desktops and software licenses that I no longer need. If I have a special project and I bring in a bunch of consultants or temps, I can set them up and then tear them down. And I know it's going to cost me 25–50% less cash. Your results will vary. If you're still working with really old equipment, you haven't invested in your technology in a long time, this may cost you money. But if you're on that constant refresh cycle where you're constantly upgrading, you will definitely save money. 50%, maybe not so much, but certainly in the 25% range. Here's a key thing, especially for all those resource-strapped organizations out there, which pretty much is everybody, is you only focus on your core business. You're out of the water business. You're out of the power business. You're out of the IT business. To the extent you want to let go, you can. You have more control, not less. Your data is secure. It's backed up. You have access to it. You're not beholden on your brother-in-law, a disgruntled employee, or somebody perhaps who doesn't know what they're doing and screws it all up. You've got compliance risk management. All these data center, all the vendors that are providing this are competing not only at the small and mid-size, but at the higher end, getting the business of banks and healthcare professionals and so on. So they're HIPAA compliant, SAS 70 and so on, PCI. You don't have to worry about getting there if you need to. Perhaps the biggest one here is continuation risk management. This was a big issue in my previous lives. It's one thing to back up your data, but if you have a full disaster where your building burns or it's flooded or you can't get access to it, what good does backed up data do you sitting on a hard drive somewhere? Really, what can you do without your applications, without your employees' access to those applications? It's continuity and risk management in name only. If you've ever tried to replace your hard drive with Carbonite or one of the other services out there, that can be a very painful process. With this, you just go somewhere else and log in, and you're back in business. I won't spend a lot of time here. This is just our commercial. But really, I just want to talk about this. What we're all about is getting rid of the frustrations of technology, which it can be very frustrating, and those who need sort of fresh options and maybe have some risk. We're really focused on getting you out of the technology business. That's all I had. Were there any questions? Yes, please.
Have you had experience with people moving traditionally more resource-intensive workloads over like graphic design or programming, things like that?
Yes. So the question was more resource-intensive knowledge workers and making the move. The only thing that I've seen where there's a challenge is 3D modeling can be difficult in this environment. Regular modeling using CAD/CAM is absolutely possible. My example of the engineer. 3D modeling can be a little bit touchy. Part of the depends on the deployment because AutoCAD likes to get hold of the kernel. and not every hosted virtual desktop allows access to the kernel, so that's one issue. The other is access to the graphics accelerators. Custom software, it really depends on it, but if it runs on a Windows machine, it'll run in this environment. There's a firm here, Fitel, that had consultants, programmers came in for a project. They use these virtual desktops for exactly that, as development desktops, and also a server, obviously, that they used. And Fitel had full control. They ran it for 6 months, and then shut them down when they were done. Exactly. And again, as I said before, your mileage may vary. I haven't had a lot of complaints, but you can rent a desktop for $125 a month, run a 1 month, 6 week, 2 months, whatever you're comfortable with, test and see if it works. Really, that's the beauty here, is that you can do these kind of things without this huge investment and buy-in and capital costs. And it's the beauty, but it's also the risk, because your employees will eventually figure it out themselves. Yeah. No, it's a budget. So the question was, is it $125 a month, regardless? No, certainly volume. For one login. So multiple people could log in and use the same desktop at different times. If you've got sort of a shared thing, but it would be for one virtual desktop with Microsoft Office Professional on it, Windows 7. Right. Well, the way this works is you're going to use something you already have. There's a way to strip the existing devices bare, so you don't have Office and all the legacy applications in offices, and they don't not tempted to use that. That's a technical discussion. But let's just, the way most people do it is, I've got an old device in the office. I want to upgrade my operating system, or I don't want to have to upgrade my equipment to support a particular application I'm deploying. So I get a virtual or hosted desktop. All I need is a browser, and you're going to go to a particular URL for your company, and you're going to be presented with the credentials, the ability to log in. Also there's a client that you download and you install, a little thin client that enables this capability. So it has to be on that desktop, whether it's at home or in the office or your neighbor's, next cube made over's desktop. Once you log in with your credentials, a virtual desktop pops up. It takes up the entire screen. Okay, and you're looking at your typical Windows desktop with your icons, your wallpaper, your start button, and all the capabilities. A browser, it's your typical Windows presented virtually. And be happy to show you what that looks like. So really, everything, all your businesses, whether it's Outlook, Excel, Office, if you've loaded QuickBooks on there, all your business is done on that virtual desktop. And when I can leave it up, log out, go to home, and I can still see my desktop sitting there with all the applications open that I left open when I closed out that virtual session. So, does that make sense? Did I answer your question? Okay. Now, if you're going to customize that desktop, somebody else comes in. It's like somebody else using your regular desktop. They may or may like the settings you may or may. That's a great question. So the question is, what about the fact that you need to be connected in order to access your information and your applications, which are remotely hosted? You do have to be connected. So where does that become an issue? People say, well, what about when I travel? Well, every airport has Wi-Fi. Well, what about when I'm on the plane? Every plane now pretty much has Wi-Fi. But more importantly, if you're still using this old desktop, if you want to compose a Word document, and then you can just drag it over to your virtual desktop when you get connected, or email it to yourself, or however you feel comfortable handling that. But really, to access it right now, there are implementations where it downloads to the device. That's where a big and expensive IT department becomes involved. And for most businesses, it really isn't necessary for that particular architecture. for the couple of times where you don't have access to the internet, which is almost never really when you think about it, because you could put a mobile card in here, and, and use Verizon's LTE. This actually has one where I can access it, whether I have a Wi-Fi account where I'm sitting or not. Any other questions? Yeah.
You're offering support non-Windows devices, iPad.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That really is the beauty of it, is that you can download the thin client for the iPad, and you'll have your Windows desktop on your Apple device. Your applications are right underneath it. You can minimize that desktop, play Angry Birds, and then come back and work on your desktop. Any other questions? Was this helpful? Different perspective, I hope, for you.
Brian, I know you said you could bring up and show an example, so I think that would be great. I didn't know if there was a place you could recommend for like online folks if they can go really would have like a video or anything to show to the online folks, because I know here we can go online and show us that.
Yeah. Actually, I didn't come prepared to do that. I didn't realize you want that. But I can provide a link where people can go, and I'll provide that to you if you can send it out. And it's a nice demo of in-process, desktop, and shows about it. Be happy to do that for you. Okay. Any other questions? Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I have a card if anybody wants one.